I understand Ms. Booth gave you a few links. You may or may not have looked at that TED Talk where I explained in a little bit of detail about the debt fair project and the collaboration with these other individuals, these comrades of mine. But let me start out with the introduction and about my education. As mentioned, I did start out, I went to SAC, San Antonio College, there in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm born and raised in Michigan, but my folks are from that area, and all my relatives are in there, and a few in California as well. I actually went, I chose to go a third year at SAC to build my portfolio, taking studio classes. And I was also part of an art guild there, which was my first, I think, like professional art or semi-professional arts collective. And I wanted to say a couple things just as students, as you're beginning or maybe a couple of semesters into your academic career and hopefully artistic career as well, that you're going to pick up skills along the way that'll aid in whatever you do. In my case, painting, like all these classes and experience in graphic design or printmaking, carpentry skills, writing, painting, computer skills, all that aids in my painting. And also when I'm composing something, maybe design on the computer, some of the painting helps with that. So you're going to retain a lot of those collective skills. And as you get more experience, that'll help you. I also wanted to say that you don't have to go it alone on everything you do, that when collaborating with others, you might want to ask people who are experts in their field, or maybe they just know a little bit more than you on a certain subject, where you want to have them maybe go over some writing you did that's about, I don't know, might be about talking about art, or it might have direct, relation to text or sculpture skills or carpentry skills or something to work that out. That in the collective I'm working with Occupy Museums, like there's a couple of them that that don't even do any physical hands-on sculpture or the making of art, but more like a lot of it graphic design, production, and also the theoretical knowledge, outreach, press, marketing. So a lot of this it's all a group effort there. So, and in the Art Guild, we did things like Oktoberfest, where we yearly fall holiday festival they have with these bedsheet banner projects. Also, we did some theater set design and projects for Earth Day. So, and just working with others with different skills, and people have different, fortes. So, and also volunteer your services to others, to really, whenever you can help someone, help them out, and don't think of it like, oh, they owe me. Think of it, what can you do to help others? And it'll pay off down the road. And this is in any profession there. Now, after SAC, I did end up, I applied to 6 different undergraduate colleges. I was accepted into all of them, and scholarships in 4 out of the 6, and a couple free rides, full 100% scholarships, and like a 40% at the Art Institute of Chicago, but it wasn't enough for me. I was also in the working class background and didn't have a fund set up to pay for my college. I knew I was gonna have to do it on my own with student loans. I ended up chose the California College of Arts in Oakland, San Francisco area. There I majored in printmaking and painting, and I also took some classes in letterpress and bookmaking too. And I was also fortunate enough to, I was the first scholar of an exchange program to École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France. My senior year, where for 21 weeks I went and studied traditional fresco, as well as paint mixing, like actually taking and grinding paint down and putting them in tubes, and traditional oil painting technique. And that taught me a lot about now when you buy paint, it's all like the same consistency of like try to room temperature butter and with these flows and fillers, but with just linseed oil and powdered pigments, they have different principles, and you can see that some colors lend themselves to different type of applications or translucency. For example, cadmium's you can get, that goes a long way, the slightest bit of pigment. And also some of the earth tones are very gritty, like the tears and ochres and siennas, and they tend not to be so good for really, really thin washes layered. But I'll talk a little bit more about that when we can see examples in my painting. I ended up applying to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my master's in painting and drawing. And I went out there, I moved beforehand, and I found out that I was on the wait list, I was told. And a friend of mine who was actually a MFA student, he was a year ahead of me, who also went to SAC, he said, Art, there is no wait list. And I'm like wondering it's very competitive. I think there was, out of 144 or something, there was like 33 accepted or that class year, and they were ranked tied for #1 with RISD in that program. But they did offer me a post-baccalaureate certificate, which allowed me a graduate studio. I could take graduate art history courses and any other courses, and I would be assigned graduate advisors and could take graduate seminars. So I went through that, I accepted that, and also ended up gaining admittance the following year. So basically I got 3 years of grad school with the equivalent of that. So it really proved crucial in the shaping of my artwork. I taught, at the time I was the only one, while a MFA student my senior year, I was teaching college courses at Robert Morris College for first, second year college students, painting, art appreciation, some graphic design, two-dimensional design, which was really nice. I ended up after a semester or two getting a couple other of my colleagues, grad students, some work there, which was nice. I stuck with them teaching after I graduated about a year, and then I moved to San Antonio. I figured that's where my parents were, and this was in 2000, beginning of 2000. I also started teaching at for a 6-year period up San Antonio College, Palo Alto College. I even drove over Texas Lutheran University, a little bit of a drive. And others also they had off campus at USAA. I believe that was through Palo Alto at the time. And teaching art appreciation there. And at St. Philip's too, I think it was a semester or two. So I came to the point of doing this adjunct moving around. And also, even since the time of grad school in Chicago, I was doing this do-it-yourself or DIY, setting up art exhibitions, doing all the lighting, writing the press releases, painting the paintings, of course, getting others with me, setting up for group shows, and doing, the labels, the graphics, everything about it, sort of more and more. And then as a college teacher, also had some input on other shows and helped selected student shows and talked about the design. But I came to a point where I started applying for full-time gigs, and I thought, well, if I had a PhD in art, that might put my resume to the top of the stacks. And I applied to Texas Tech University for Fine Art Critical Studies, a PhD program, which I entered in 2006, was there, finished 3 years, did the coursework, and also taught. And then after my dissertation proposal was accepted, and that was examining working class Chicano identities in 3 works of 3 artists, 2 in San Antonio, 1 in Chicago. They all dealt with the figure and public art. They were all living artists. And it was about how the location affected the production of their artwork and how the location affected the visitor's experience of the art. So once that was accepted in 2009, which if I don't know if you recall that the housing crash then, and it was probably the worst, one of the worst times, except for maybe now, to come to New York City and move and try to look for a job and whatnot. So I came out here in 2009. So it's been 11 years now in New York. And I started at the working at a public art sculpture as an artist assistant at Governor's Island for Travis Mung, this big interactive artwork, sculpture, painting. It was painted sculptures, polychroma sculpture. And then I had a job at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the retail, which was a few months during the holiday season. Later on, I was picked up as a regular retail employee, and I was working a security guard there for a while, about 5 months, and I really didn't think that was for me. I thought I would be able to teach other classes as well, but it turned out to be not possible for my mindset and my work schedule. I quit that job in the retail. I didn't plan on it, but I asked them and they hired me back a couple of days later. I stayed right with them, and then for another year and a half, and later went to custodial for a year, and then applied for got the job of technician, departmental technician in Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, which is moving the art around the photographers in the museum, scientific research, object conservation, paper conservation, painting conservation, photographers. I don't know if I mentioned that. And then also installing art. When there was loans, I would go to the storeroom and pick up the art. And also when it was an outgoing loan, I'd bring that for them to the storeroom, and then also follow the art on computer, on TMS, computer-based system, and make any, also, do some things with adjusting labels and doing some dusting of the sculptures, because custodial weren't allowed to dust off the actual artworks or platforms, or make the art in the galleries look good. So I did that 5 years for Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and then it's been a year and a month now. I transferred over to the American wing. That's where that giant painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware is, that famous one, and all those, the guy who did the paintings of George Washington that's on your dollar bill, emulated from that. Those paintings are hanging there. So it's been really great to work in that atmosphere of artwork and seeing all the exhibitions that are rotating, special exhibitions, as well as the permanent collections. So I just wanted to mention some of my background. And if you could start the PowerPoint to share that, Ms. Booth. The first image just has my name, and then after that, it's the first artwork, which is a drawing.
Okay, hold on just a second.
While she's calling that up, I wanted to say, you're going to go to full screen, or?
Yeah.
The first image, the first two images are drawings that are 11 by 14 inches. This is called Below Sea Level.
Here, there we go.
Oops.
So here, let me just show the title page. There's your title.
That's.
Okay.
Oh, I wanted to say, in the education, I ended up while just before I was a guard, I ended up finishing my dissertation while in New York City in 2011, which is right about the time of this. So, Below Sea Level, Now on these are abstract works, these painting ones, they are referencing a lot of times an interior or exterior landscape, also space. I associated and compare space around me that aren't necessarily me uh, sketching in front of an actual space, but more of a theoretical space. And on this below sea level, I was thinking of like a cross-cut view. If you were underwater to say a pond, or if you can think of like I was thinking more of a pond, but even like if it's an aquarium, that cross-cut view. And I was thinking some of that lower shape on the lower black shape, the lower left, as like being an incline showing gravity and weight, and this is with charcoal, and how that weighs down. And some of these things like gravity and some of those areas right above it that are lighter, that aren't sort of floating and aren't affixed to a ground plane, or the sides seem to be more weightless, the sense of weightlessness. If you were to say the sea level line, I would say that somewhat horizontal line about 2/3 up the page. I wanted to comment here, and this ties in with the other works. You'll see that on these abstract works, I usually divide up. I'm thinking about the composition, even though there's a lot of sort of scribbly marks or very quick gestural marks. There's distinct shapes where if they, at the first pass, they might not be clarified or resolved, but then they end up being clarified as I work. And this is a mixed media. So the blue is acrylic paint. There's a brown, which is sepia ink. There's some graphite and charcoal, which is a thinner, softer charcoal. And then the blacker, about 95% black, dark block charcoal. Also charcoal pencil. And so the charcoal is a dry media, and the ink and paint is wet media. And these are usually done with these first two drawings. I did a series of about a dozen. When I do use the wet media, I usually let it, at that instance, I might use like a towel or take like a blotter to remove some of the paint or ink pigment. I might do that right away, but whatever I do with the wet media at that instance, or at that time, excuse me, I usually let it sit overnight and dry, because acrylic dries fast, and the ink, a couple days later, it'll be all the way dry. So that way, if I go in with charcoal, it can get sort of, while the paint is wet, it has a different sort of properties, and some of it I don't care for. I'd rather just let it wait. And then, 2 days later, I can always take an eraser and scrub the charcoal or graphite line, maybe leave like a smudge or 5% gradation. And I've heard Ms. Booth mention value in your paintings. You probably know that, relative lightness to darkness. So I think of that even with the graphite and the line and the charcoal, even though you think of that as black, but the pencil could be, 20% gray, 100%, the charcoal block could be 95% gray, like almost black. And also getting a lot of various mark making mileage depending on the tools. If it's a charcoal pencil, a block charcoal, if it's a graphite pencil that has a sharp point to it. Even with that has those grays and blacks and whites, I can get a lot. On the ink, some of that's applied with a paintbrush. Some of it you can see like a blot, like I would let it drip from maybe 8 inches above, and it'd form like a circle or a little puddle on there. And then I could smear that with a sponge or rag or paper towel. And if you look at the lower right quadrant, that area that's light blue, if you look close, that's the particular ink that I had, was like in an ink dropper, was on the lid, sort of built in. So I'm drawing with the ink dropper like a squiggly line around it. And I let that dry a couple days, and then later, some of this blue was applied, mixed in with water. The acrylic, I can thin that down with water and use it like sort of like a wash. Also, there's, I'm sure you found out what mediums are, that acrylic mediums could be gloss medium or matte medium, or it's like a clear vehicle that's combined with the pigment, so you can thin out the pigment so it disperses it instead of 100% pigment or 100% paint. I might mix half medium with it, and if I painted a very, very thin wash or layer with that with a brush, it would look like a light blue, as opposed to if I took a thick brush of opaque blue, where it'd be that 100% blue. So I can get those variations around. Also with the paper's untreated, so it's porous. So some of that would absorb into obviously the ink. It's porous to when you scrub in sort of or draw in those little crevices, it would absorb the ink or charcoal, and also the paint that would seep in to grab a hold of that. And if I went in a little more with like a palette knife, that would press it in there, and you can see in that central area on the right side, some vertical and horizontal marks with the blue is with a palette knife, and where it's pressed in a lot, it's showing more of the white of the page. So also some of these lines, I'll use important, and this is through all the works, but since I'm right here, verticals and horizontal compositional lines that help to structure. It relates to the edge of the picture plane, the right and left side of the paper, or at the top that there's a little gap, but that's sort of a horizontal line, basically. That also acts as a framing device, as it does on the left side in the center. You can see, just for a moment, to take that area, and again, I was saying about below sea level as the black, if you could sort of buy into that as being gravity or a landmass on an incline, if you will. Some of these diagonals, and also diagonals in my other paintings, you think of gravity, and that whenever you see a diagonal, whether it's a shape or a realistic diagonal, it sort of lends the eye to go in the direction of gravity and how that would transition across the page. I was also thinking of some of those lines at the top of that black shape at the bottom left and bottom, as if those were sticks or something growing out from the bed of the pond, if you will. And those tend to come closer to just talking about space. When it has that 100% black, it tends to be closer, and that 100% white is deeper space. And where you see in the center, slightly to the left of that sepia and blue, I put a white paint over that where it toned down the color. So it's white over that blue, which makes it a lighter blue, and white over that sepia, which makes it a lighter color brown. But what that does is it puts like this milky sort of sense of space in between the 100% black and the 100% white of the page. So that reads as a deeper sense of space. And some of that too, those compositional lines just lead the eye from shape to shape. One other thing I'll point out, as with all these works, drawings and paintings, I tend to have these composition as a key thing, as is the shapes and some of these verticals and horizontals and diagonals. But with these shapes, I try to get a lot of variation around the edges of the shape. So if you look at that sort of square-ish shape on the right center, on the right of the page, there's a lot of variation. It isn't just a cut taped line. There's it might have scribble at the top, or but you still see that, read that as a shape. I also do that around different shapes, and also I try to do it within the shapes, have a different type of application that's used on there. And I noticed Ms. Booth was telling me about in this case, it's monochromatic, or well, there's sepias. Technically, that's a color too, that's sepia, so it isn't just the blue, but basically black and white and blue, and there's an accent of that brown that's used in there. So it's not strictly monochromatic, but basically it reads that way. And I noticed Ms. Booth had told me you had learned about the complementary colors, and that comes up. We'll talk about that later in the painting, but not only the colors and the composition and these shapes and these edges, I'm also concerned, I want to get a lot of variation in all of this, and also the application of media, how it's handled. A lot, and I would suggest that if you have not just one brush, have a variety of brushes, some short hair, some long hair, different size palette knives. And some of these are plastic kits that cost, you know, maybe $5. And even at Dick Blick or some of these different brushes, you can get very cheap cost. I'm also concerned for have a concern for the medium too. If we could go to the next image, which is the second drawing. And this is monochromatic because it's only the sepia and then the black and white. And here I'm using charcoal, graphite, and ink as well. And one thing I also tend to do is, you can see the variation of these little shapes. And here on the lower quadrant, the lower left, you see you can see a little clearer that drawing with the ink dropper. And here on some of these brown areas, you can see where I took a paintbrush on the ink, and where the concentrated brush pressure was pushed in the center, that revealed more of the white of the page, and the outer edges of the line of the brush, you can see that's more of a darker brown on that, on a couple of the vertical, on the right side of the page, and in the center you can see that. Also true, because there's less color than the last one, you can really see a variety of the marks that are made just with the graphite and charcoal of the black and white. There's, you know, some of this I commented, it might be a really sharp pencil with barely holding it and dragging it around, or it might be scrubbed in. You can get a lot of variation with value this way. Also the line, a lot of variation in line. This also 11 or 14 by 11 as well. And another thing too with these shapes, like if you compare that darkest sort of square-ish, I say square-ish shape with the charcoal that's rubbed in, it's a similar shape to the upper left corner where it has lightly that rectangle. It sort of continues on like it might be a similar shape where it's the page crops that, so it's some of that's in the distance there. And some of the I think of these shapes that pull together, like on the right side, it's figurative. It's not like a person, like a figure, but that sort of dark rectangle that's with a charcoal is sort of stacked onto that shape on the right, that oblong shape, and it sort of connects together, even though they're odd shapes that are just sort of affixed together, and almost works like an abstract entity. And then on the left side of the page, you can see where there's a lot of bare white on the edge of the page, and that really gives the opportunity, as well as the top, where there's empty space, and that really pushes that white gets pushed back into deeper space because of that. Because the white in the center on the right side, that shape has lines all the way around it. It tends to pop to the foreground, even though it's the same white of the page. And how that works is, you know, comes how the paint and the media is manipulated, or the ink rather, and the graphite, it'll all change that. If we could go to the next image. This one called Introduction. This is acrylic on canvas. This is 12 inches square, so it's similar in size to the last two drawings. I put this one on. Acrylic, I like, I'm guessing you guys are working with acrylic because it dries quick. And also there's ventilation issues with oils, and you need to store it. That becomes an issue. And with acrylic, I have a whole lot of, I can build up with that, the paint. And I use these different mediums where I combine with the paint, where I could have a thin paint. I also have use some of this paint I buy from Gara Pigments, which here in New York, where it's a concentrated colorant that is almost pure pigment where you have to mix it with medium, but it's in liquid form. So I can get the consistency of like, um, milk. So it can be really thin, or I can put in different mediums where it's the consistency of toothpaste to be thicker. I can get different mediums that are white as in color. Some are gray. There's modeling paste, which is white, where you get almost like a sculptural quality, very thick. And I can mix that in with the paint to get different consistencies of how the paint reacts. Sometimes I'll put the texture on the surface and then paint a skin of opaque paint over it so you won't see the texture. Other times I could paint in the medium, mix the paint in with it so I can maybe see the underpainting underneath it. So it depends what I want to achieve and how I do that. And then this one, you can also see some of those significant compositional shapes that I use, and there's not so much horizontal lines in this one, but certainly that vertical on about a third of the way on the left side, and some of the also like that sort of like functions that lower left shape as a ground diagonal shape, not quite a triangle, but you can see the gravity where that's anchored, and also how that sort of anchors and it stabilizes it at the bottom. I sort of looked at that central shape, even though there's a lot of shapes because of color they're put together. It seems like one sort of figure or entity rather. And the background is not just black. There's some black mixed in there, but some of it's alizarin crimson, some of it's green. It's the darkest value of those different colors. So that sort of unifies as a background shape. And we see that figure ground phenomena where the central area of all the color, even though it's many shapes together, having all that darker area around it, it becomes more like the background or in the back, and sort of hinting at this space. And this one I called it introduction. You can see that almost like a staff, that thick vertical. And I was thinking of like it's not quite a hand around it, but I think of like a figure. And the other one, sort of the hand on the right side, that shape, the edge is not really any hard edges like around the staff, but I call it the staff, the vertical. But it's a whole lot of different colors that are pieced together of the shape. It's sort of drooping, and almost like if someone were to old school introduce themselves and tip their hat down, sort of addressing not the viewer, but someone to the right of the painting. If we could go to the next one. This one's false fulcrum at rest. This is 24 by 36, so it's 2 foot by 3 foot. So not only with these mediums and glosses and paint applications, that if you can see that green on the lower left corner, which is over the blue, I actually had it tilted horizontally, and I painted right from the tube with the paint, that green, and then I sort of pounded down a little bit to cause some of that to drip, and then I set it flat to dry afterwards. And these we can see those diagonal lines talking about gravity. And this one, a fulcrum where it teeter-totters is a fulcrum, and how the balance and weight sort of moves from one side to the other. I was kind of thinking of that into the space. I wanted to also point out these layers and layers and layers that are put on it. Those yellows are different types of yellow. It's not just one yellow. At first, if you go up close and look, there's lemon yellow, cad yellow light. There's also a house paint yellow that's very chalky. They have different properties of flats and mattes and glossies and semi-glosses. And the pink, it's not just one pink either. I'll use, in this case, pink house paint with some of those shapes are uniform pink that's covering the texture. Others are mixed white in with the pink. And if you look at that, see that sort of triangle shape at the right side where the blue sort of slash, light blue slash is? Yeah, on the right corner of that goes to the edge, that actual triangle, a smaller triangle, has more red in it. So it's a subtle of, and if you think about all these other reds, some of the alizarin crimsons and some of the magenta reds, like I'm thinking of that with the red, and then the complementary, some of this lighter green as well, and some of these darker greens. So in different, the different orange and blue. Um, to offset that blue that was I put a little bit of that orange in there that's very light. So I'm thinking about the relative value within these complementary colors too, not just the colors. How does thinking of color as value, when how much of a value, the relative darkness to lightness, do I want to put in there? And also the technique of these different brushes. Some paint, I'm using actually some silver paint. I also use in these metallics, fluorescence, sand, carborundum, which is a gray, dark, almost blackish sand quality, glass beads and glitter. I'll use that. I'll show that a little later. So I'm looking at these surface materials and how they work. And there's a section in here, I'm working with a metallic where I'm actually thinning that down with pigment, or with a medium, which metallics aren't good at all for mixing with medium. They're more about the surface, but I'm sort of playing with that to see how far I can push it. Let's go to the next image, please. This is internal campfire. This is like 3 foot by 4 foot. And on this one, again, some of those horizontals and diagonals, there's some vertical shapes that are important that set up the space. Some of these open areas, like on the top half of the left side, that shape that's sort of orange-ish, that acts as a negative space and goes further back from that darker charcoal area that comes closer. Just like the very, very flat blue it has this figure ground phenomena where those black shapes are in front of it, and then the blue behind it. There's also, I'm alluding to that horizontal line, if you see about 2/3 across. That's sort of I think of that as like a horizon line of an invented landscape. And I think of some of these as not an actual interior or exterior, but I think of that back orange shape like a wall, like a back wall, or a back plane, if you will. And also in the center, that area with the diagonal where it's like receding to that area, I think of that as like a ground plane. And this one, that little swash or a splotch of paint in the center, I was thinking that like an internal campfire, like if a fire was burning with that orange in this sort of invented little spot, this little area where I made my campfire, and that's where energy's radiating. I was kind of going with that. And here, some of that carborundum is prevalent in the darker black areas. You can't really see that with the detail, but it's some of that's a lighter, lighter grays. Some of it's that black is really glossy. Some of it is texture, some of it is matte. Again, you'd start to see the variations that play. But just with time constraints, if we could go to the next image. This is the fourth wall. Again, I'm thinking with some of these, this is the fourth wall in theater. They call the stage, when you're on the stage as an actor, there's the 3 walls around you, and then the audience would be the fourth wall. And I'm thinking this is the viewer would be the fourth wall, which is opened. And you can see like this activity going on of like a stage set design, and seeing the different side planes, wall planes. That silver area is like a ceiling plane. Some of these other shapes are put through, and some of this texture. If you could, Sabra, could you put my screen of me on for a second? Is that too hard, or?
I can.
Oh.
Well, and
If it's, I can wait till later. I can wait till later since we're so
I
close.
think it'd be better if we can wait till later.
yeah. Something else I wanted to point out. Okay, and on that one, there's a lot of texture and matte and gloss things going on. And if we could go to the next image, which will be a white. This is what I just briefly, I put a lot of slides, but just to talk about the occupied museums, I wanted this collective I've been a part of since 2012. With when I started, there was 12 of us in there that went to, we were selected. It was a lot of protest of museums, a lot of performance space, a lot of activism, a lot of these press releases and call outs to cultural institutions. And a lot of it, you know, around the MoMA, along also the Lincoln Center, some of these other, the Frick, we've done this over the Met, other places. And some of these actions got us some notoriety from a European curator that invited us to go to Berlin, Germany, to be a part of the 6th Berlin Biennale in 2012. So we did that. A lot of activist groups. They invited a lot of activist groups from around the world, and we went on different protests. And we had a protest and a performance at the Pergamon Museum at the altar, and also we had within the Kunst building, we had talks, outreach, and a lot of that. But we also protested in Deutsche Bank as well, talking about finances. But why don't we go ahead to the next image, which is a proposal of debt fair. And this is relating art to debt and how artists, everyday artists have all kinds of debt in mind. I'm going to go really quick. These were, if you go to the next image, this is one of the architectural models of an art fair, in this case, Frieze Art Fair, of what it would be to combine everyday artists, and they were at the top row along with these blue chip artists. Next image. And this is the little detail of it where you can see the little, at the top strips would be everyday artists, and that would be bundled in sort of sections. And then they could be sold in bundles. Like this might be artists that their utilities were shut off or been evicted or got a car loan repossessed. If you could go to the next image. The next image was a gallery, actually a gallery sitting. Next image. And here's a detail of that same model, and you can see the cutouts on the left side are the sheetrock is exposed. Same thing with that circle, and they would be in a bundle as well. If you could go to the next image. We were selected from the press to go to Art League Houston, and they flew 5 of us out here. This was the call for entries. They flew us out twice from New York to Houston and set us up in a house to construct this. Next image. We had a whole graphic arts campaign relating these different bundles, questionnaires. The next image. This explains all the bundles, and we had brochures. We brought back those 2 architectural models from Brooklyn, and they were related. Like that slash mark is the fear and anxiety bundle. The triangle is the artists that have gallery representation, yet still were struggling under debt. The large quadrant was a variation of banks. If you next image. And that circular image was artists. They considered their occupation to be an artist, yet they had 2 or more jobs. Next image. And it was this was the graphic key that was put on a table within the gallery. Next image. This is one, and that's like 6 foot in diameter, that circle that was cut out. And from then we started submitting to other galleries. So the next image. And this is actually, we were awarded from the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. They gave us a $2,000 to have an extremely high resolution of that bundle printed out, and this was put in one in Gallery 400 in Chicago, also the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. We couldn't attend it, but that's what that is. And we also put literature about the bundle and Occupy Museum's Debt Fair project, and we listed all the names of those individuals as well. Next image, please. Also, 2016, this is an exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum. Next image. This is showing that's a Wall Street bull, and there's a different parks around where the Met and the Brooklyn Museum is, Central Park and Prospect Park. And under there's a little angel on top, dancer. And then the next image is I actually made this Met model in foam core at the bottom. The other side is a Brooklyn Museum model, and we actually went, I had to put on the title that my name wasn't released because of the Met affiliation. We were gonna do some activity at the Met. I'll leave it at that. It's being recorded. But it was so cold in February we had to cancel it. So on the wall title it said, an artist that must remain anonymous. I thought that was kind of cool. Next image. And we were then from Houston, we were selected for the Whitney Biennial in 2017. That's the image. It's in the back in the center. If you could go to the next image. There's the screenshot, and on the right is a screen of the 509 artists we're rotating that went through a questionnaire across the country and in Puerto Rico, where they talked about their debt and submitted images, and we selected 30 artists where we put in the wall on the left side. Also, you could, if you please look at the TED Talk, it explains it more. If you could go to the next image. I'm sort of going because of time. There's the detail of it, and this is a giant infographic. It has the key on it. We also had 5 audio guides, and the gray squares indicate the ongoing additional artists that were present. Next image. We also designed the different wallpaper that goes behind it, and that paint, we painted that, and I laid out the computer cuts. I told the Whitney how to cut out that wall and where to put 3 arts needed electrical outlets, and I spaced the studs, and I had to tell them where exactly to put that up, and they did all that work. Next image. And Black Rock, this is a protest against Larry Fink, and we all threw the masks of Fink up in the air. Next image.
Art, could you tell them who Larry Fink is?
Oh, Larry Fink is the CEO of Black Rock, and we found out that all 3 of the bundles of Puerto Rican artists that were indebted to Banco Popular and First Bank of Puerto Rico. Also, the other bundle was Chase Bank. And also the third bundle was Navient, student loan provider. Black Rock owned, was in the top 2 or 3 positions, if not the first. And Larry Fink is the CEO of that. And at the top it says the greatest stores of wealth today are contemporary art and Manhattan apartments. So we had his masks on there, and then we all lifted it up and threw it.
And wasn't he on the board of directors for some of these museums?
For MoMA, he was on the board of director. We protested MoMA too, but during this, for him to be taken off it. And also at the time he was on Trump's advisory board, and he did voluntarily go off Trump's advisory board. And we had other activist protests too around MoMA and around different areas, but I know we're crunching it for time. If you could go to the next slide.
If you all don't, MoMA is the Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah, and there, the Whitney Biennial, all the artists there's 63 Arts Collective, 59 bachelor's degrees, 40 master's degrees. I'm one of the 4 doctorate degrees, and 5.78 million for that biennial in 2017. I just got a couple more images, if I may, please. There was a hurricane in Puerto Rico while it was up, and the Whitney agreed to ship it to the Puerto Rican bundle of the same 10 artists. They shipped it to El Museo del Barrio, and then later shipped it off. So that was nice of them. And we can see that graphic. We also did the Banco Popular wallpaper. And in this case, this is about 12 foot by 10 foot. This is the graphic image. And that graph shows Puerto Rico's debt to the US from 2000 to 2015, going straight up. And we did these graphics to scale the images, the wallpaper to scale, and the text to scale. And it was a big undertaking to do this. And then just the one last slide. After this, we did Debt Fair New Mexico. That's in the shape of New Mexico at 516 Art Space. And I again did all this on AutoCAD and SketchUp, and we all worked together, the 5 of us, through this too. And that sort of, there's a detail if you want to flick the end slide, which shows some of that artwork up close, and that had different wallpaper as well on that. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Sorry, I went about 5 minutes over, but
That's okay.
a lot of info, and I wanted to really stress the painting aspect of it at the beginning.
Okay, let me fix my screen so that we can now go back to being with the class.
There's that big painting. I just wanted to show you
Okay.
some of the textures.
Oh, great.
That's all that you really can't see through that image.
Well, we got there. You could get a sense for the surface. So thank you so much. And well, Dr. Polendo, I really appreciated your comments about especially the physicality of paint in your work. Your comments about the use of brushes. I had shared in the chat garapaints.com, where you get the pure pigment and then you add the mediums in order to create your paint. And I didn't realize that at De Beaux-Arts that you studied how to take pigment and grind it and mix it with mediums to create your own paint. So that was really interesting, or with linseed oil. And also thank you for discussing your really just important activism with Occupy Museums and the Debt Fair project. That's congratulations on being included in the Whitney Biennial. So that's such a great accomplishment. And you know, I was thinking I'll just start off with a question about that the first images you were showing, the works on paper, and you referred to those as drawings. And I'm thinking of some other artists like Bryce Marsden and you know, Cy Marden and Cy Twombly, and their use of works on paper, and that sort of line between drawing versus painting. So any reflections you want to have on that, and then let's have some student questions.
Well, thank you for your comments, first of all. I appreciate that. And yeah, definitely especially with the ink and acrylic paint, it starts to go, and with the layering, it starts to get in there with blurring the lines of drawing and painting. And I think the second one with more charcoal and graphite did lend itself more towards the drawing. But yeah, certainly there's a continuum of that. And you know, and a lot of those smaller ones, or several of those, I will take those and use those as a study for, even though I sold those two and other ones in that series, but I use that for a study for the larger acrylic paintings.
Great, thank you. All right, let's hear some questions from students.
I have a question. So the whole art debt, what type of reception did you receive from that? And did it also bring up different questions about other degrees that cost a lot of money? Did it become a big issue like that, just in general of the how expensive school is?
Well, yeah, and it's the debt fair. Yeah, when we went to Houston, we did a statewide call for all around the state of Texas, including got a lot of submissions from San Antonio as well, and some San Antonio artists in there, as well as Dallas, Houston, other areas, mainly Houston though. There was a big, lot of controversy when we first stayed there. We were setting it up and had a question that they were thinking about, some people getting offended. Why are you asking us about our debt and this, and thinking we're some like big New York City think tank that come down and tell Texas how to, which wasn't the case at all. We're barely scraping it ourselves, and we're like we on basically zero budget for all of this until the gallery provided that. We were getting some flack from them, and the questionnaires in Houston, as well as the national questionnaire, was pretty in-depth. And if they had to go, there were some in-depth questions about their debt, and if they had to be comfortable about going all the way through that questionnaire and loading up their images and then submitting it. And there was also it's not on view right now, but we have an ongoing debtfair.org website where it listed all their responses, and you could see the different personal stories, the narrative that certain quotes about debt, how it affected them. And at the Whitney Museum, we also put those personal, about 3-4 sentences, as along with their images, as it continuously scrolled those 509 artists there. But some people didn't participate because they thought it was too invasive. So they didn't have to, and others wanted to express that, hey, I'm under the gun too. And I myself, I'm almost just shy of 300,000 in debt, because so I had the most debt and the highest degree, and knowing full well what I'm going in for. But it's you got to watch out for it. And the site is down now; it's being updated, but. I just checked it last night, unless Noah finished that.
I think he did. I just went to it. It's lot. I mean, you can get to it. I shared it in the chat, and it's also in the module about art in our Dr. Polendo in our Canvas course. Okay, good question, Leslie. So some other questions, please.
Sir, when you're making your art, is there anything that's inspires you, or is there a certain technique that you prefer over another?
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
It depends is the short answer, but I'll go in a little bit more than that. Sometimes, some people say the toughest thing is having a blank page in front of you or a blank canvas, which for me, that's never an issue. I'm pretty fearless where I'll just put a mark on there and work from there. That's not the end mark. That's not going to be if it's whether it fails or succeeds. It's a place to build from, and painting is all about layering. Sometimes I wanted to include a couple of recent things, but they weren't far enough, and I didn't have the documentation. Sometimes I do studies that allude to particular figurative elements. I was thinking about bringing the figure back, and I can share. This was one of my little sketches that a painting I'm working on now is based off. So you can see some of the shapes and those verticals, and this is with a Sharpie marker. So it all changes, but other times too, it might. I might put in things like, sometimes there's like a figurative thing like a hand or a gesture. Other times it would allude to, like I said, a lot of ways the landscape and architecture, but which is very general. But there are some things that are more specific. Like I tried to some of the thing with the palette, like in San Antonio, a lot of vibrant colors. I got some on my palette, but I'm bi, so I mean a lot of things I'm not shying away from all these non-macho colors, if you will, like some of the glitter and glass beads and metallics and pinks, and I like working with all that. But it's very, the application is still rugged, or if you will, it ties in there. And sometimes I put in other elements. One work was I finished but didn't have it documented. It had an AC/DC metal belt buckle that was on the side of it, that if you peek to the side, you can see some of that in there. So sometimes there's little hints of it, and I want to go bring out figuration more. And I used to do some of that in undergrad, so I want to bring more of it out, but let's see how it comes out.
Great, excellent question. Okay, next. Can I have another question?
I do.
Okay.
So my question is, so you went to Paris to do the paint mixing, correct?
No, I did the application. It was the first scholar exchange program. So me and someone else were the initial recipients. So we had to put our artwork as submit a series of images of our art as well as a statement. And also I submitted in my proposal that I wanted to study art history at these museums. And I spent I took extra student loans, $5,000, to go all around Europe to see all the museums and take notes and chronicle an art history journal, if you will. And not only the paint mixing, but the fresco technique, mixing it with lime and lime slate, and with the trowel and powdered pigments, doing all that as well, and as well as the application of traditional application of how the masters applied oil paint. So it was a combination of all three. And I had a contemporary studio, which was odd for them because they did the atelier, which means studio. Usually you're there for a semester under one professor, but I said I wanted all of these things to do a little bit of all. So it was a combination of that. And then when I came back to California, I shared some of that information that I learned.
Cool. Would you ever like release a catalog of the research that you gained from those European museums?
No, it wasn't that. It was more of a journal or a blog. It wasn't. It was a lot of personal thoughts, more like a personal journal. And I didn't list for the art history course. I actually had to make a supplementary, use that as a basis for some papers that I had to submit to get art history credit. So it wasn't. Back then, it was more just personal journal, and how that influenced me, like seeing in like Picasso's Guernica, and Barcelona, Madrid is Guernica, also in Amsterdam, the Rembrandts and the Rijksmuseum, and Oslo and London, and Italy, Florence, Rome. But it wouldn't. I have that little booklet, but it's more personal notes and stuff. And then I made the papers, our history papers, I don't have any longer.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaylee. That was an interesting question. Okay, next, let's have some other questions.
So I do have a question myself. This is Angelica speaking, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So the question that I do have is, so I'm not sure what your personal background is like in terms of like the family that you come from. But okay, I guess I'll speak from my experience. So I come from a family where like I worry about the people that depend on me.
Worry about what?
And how they would do if I were to say, for instance, travel, you know, whether it be nationally or internationally. I'm so sorry. Are you having trouble? Is this better with as far as hearing goes?
That's better now. You said you were worried about what?
So I come from a family where I'm concerned about the people who, I guess you could say, rely on my services, if you will, or they need me to be able to like be around them. And so like, you know, maybe that's just more of like a perception I have for myself. But like, if you came from the same family, or if you have some type of input on like how to be able to like be okay with this, how would you be able to like separate yourself enough from the people that you are around in your family, or you know, within your normal life, to be able to just go travel all over the world? Because that's a concern that I've always dealt with as an artist. Like I want to travel, but I'm not so sure how to be able to do that, like prioritize that.
Yeah, well, just like I mentioned, I was brought up in Michigan, and there's me, and I have one other a sister, and she's older than me, and she had a couple of children and was married. I mean, so the parents were happy that they already had grandkids, so I didn't have to, wasn't on that guilt trip, so to speak. So, and I was wanted to really pursue my education. My mother especially instilled that in me, and she even suggested like you go to the best. You know, I wouldn't advise this, but she told me that the best places you get into, you go, you apply to, and if you get accepted, you go. And I did that, and if I probably would do it again differently, just because of the costs and student loans, and there's different things going on with that. But when I went back to answer your question again, when I decided to move back in 2000 to San Antonio, is because I was away for 6 years. I was traveling around to California and Chicago and Paris and Europe, and it was a total of only 6 weeks that I had spent with my parents in 6 years, outside of phone calls every week, of course. But so there was that, and I decided, well, I'll be able to get some teaching experience and get a studio going and exhibit. There are things, though, where those are long, extensive excursions. Nowadays, there's online things where even if you were to take some of these things like a low residency, they even have MFAs like some of these where you would go online and then in the summer maybe take a few weeks there. There's also artist residencies for anywhere from 7 days to 2 months that might, or any period in between, like Vermont Studio Center or the Headlands or some of these where you would be away for 2 weeks at a time or whatever duration. So you could travel in that way, or if you're near a bigger city, like when I was in San Antonio, doing some excursions to Houston or Dallas or Marfa to try to get in, build connections and exhibit. And it is tough. And like I said, I would probably do it different because I did a lot of it on student loans, but these experiences were very valuable to me that I couldn't, they're irreplaceable, that there's no way I could have done it because without the student loan. So I made that decision, and I'm also at the Met working. It's eligible for one of these public service loan forgiveness. I'm already almost 6 years through that, and they hypothetically say if I go 10 years, the loans will be forgiven. So we'll wait and see on that. But we'll wait and see. There's also a Oxbow residency from the scholarships from various colleges too. In the summer at SA, School of the Art Institute of Chicago has too. I hope that answers your question.
It does. It does. Thank you so much.
That was a very thoughtful question, Angelica, and I'm sharing some of those websites in the chat. Okay, can I have some? Sure. Can I have some other questions, please? I think Noah, did you have a question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Noah.
So I'm friends with this owner of this art gallery in Alamo Heights. And so what's your thing about getting artwork into a gallery?
And you're thinking about applying, or you would like your work to be shown there?
Yes.
I would say if you, I don't know if you've shown your work before previously. Sometimes it depends on the actual gallery. Like some are specialized where some like might show only watercolors, or some might only show figurative work, realistic work. It depends, to try to find a gallery that matches of the way you work. And I would develop a portfolio because you'd have to show them. So to take good documentation of your works of art and have those, if not on a website or a PowerPoint, Nowadays, galleries used to go in there and I'd visit the galleries at openings. They don't have much of that anymore, but I'd get to make a point of introducing myself to the gallery owner, or if they're not there, one of the managers or directors. I would sign in the guest book, stay for the opening, talk to the artists, show that you're interested in the gallery, and go back, month to month for different exhibitions. Be inquisitive, and then after a while, if you think the gallery's a good fit, you could even ask if you can make an appointment to show your artwork. Sometimes there's a studio visit, but there's less of that now with COVID, or if you don't have a studio, so you could stop by. I've seen some galleries you stop by with like your laptop and they would look through the PowerPoint presentation there and discuss your work and see. And sometimes there's also, sometimes some of these galleries offer points of the year. They might have 1 or 2 months of the year where they're having a group show. There might be see if they have submissions for these, or they might ask for a proposal. Right now, with a couple of friends, I made a proposal that submitting into Apex Art. So we might, trying to get a show, and they offer this one time a year where you can apply. Other ones, but it's tough to get that. But if the gallery matches in there, visit the gallery. If you have another, maybe you're showing somewhere maybe it's at another gallery that isn't as your target gallery you want, but you have some pieces in the group show, maybe let them know I'm showing here at this other gallery if you want to go take a look. Or maybe it's even a coffee shop where they have gallery walls that are rotated, something easier to get into, where say, hey, it's going to be up here a couple months. If you happen to see this, please take a look. I'd like to, and then just sort of gradually work your way in there to ask. But sometimes if it's a top blue chip gallery, it might be, they might only want people that are, look at their roster of artists, research them. Maybe are they all like MFA graduates, or do they have long exhibition history, like they've been showing 5 years before they even got to that gallery? So I would look and see the type of artist too.
Okay, that was a good question, Noah. And I concur with everything that Art said, and I can add on to that later at another time. Can I have some other questions? Do I have anybody else?
I have a question. And this is Caitlin.
Yes, Caitlin. Great. Thank you.
So what was, I guess, your mental process going through your journey of becoming a professional artist? Like, how was it health-wise?
And Caitlin, why don't you make your video available so he can see you?
Okay. I'm right here.
It, like, throughout like I went from like in high school, I had pretty good grades and stuff, and at the end I kind of was, I graduated on time and wasn't, I don't even know, B- average maybe, or maybe C+. No, I think it was B- at least. But I played guitar, was in a band, and more, concerned about having a good time. And it came to a point a couple of years later, like what do I want to, I need to buckle down a little more. And when I went to San Antonio, I remember there was professors in high school, or teachers, that were saying, well, you could do good in like graphic design, like they make money there. And when I arrived in San Antonio, I called some graphic design firms saying, like, where would you suggest that if I asked to speak with, a manager or something, some higher up boss, and where would you suggest that I study in order to be hired into your company or companies like yours? And they said that San Antonio College has a good graphic arts program. And I went into there and I found out taking graphic arts coursework. I showed them, it was Mel Casas who passed away, but he was a prominent Chicano artist, and I'm of Mexican descent as well. I showed him my portfolio and he goes, of all the stuff, and he's like, well, it was enough to get in, but I had to sort of start at the ground level. And I found out the graphic arts courses, half of those requirements were fine arts courses. You had to take drawing 1 and 2, design 1, which is two-dimensional design, composition, design 3, which is color theory, composition. You had to take those in order to, as a requirement for graphic arts. So I took 2 and 2 on the first year. The second year, for 1 semester, I took 5 graphic arts courses. And I said, I'm buckling. I got straight A's, and I said, never again, because I didn't want people telling me, do this now, do something else. I do additional work, say, no, do this. I want this. No, go back. I want the cat painted or something. And I said, I want to do what I want to do. I want to make what I want to make. I want to create. I really like the process of creating. And then so I took drawing 3 and drawing 4 and painting 1 and painting 2. And I got really serious. I ended up with an A average at SAC. And like I said, I took that additional year and I said, I'm going to apply to try to get a scholarship. And my mindset was, I wanted to get a scholarship, and I was offered several. And even in California, that they, Chicago offered me 40%. An undergraduate said that's not enough, because in California College of the Arts offered 100%, and as did Cleveland. And I said, well, Oakland and the Bay Area versus Cleveland, and it's a better. I'd rather go to California. And then it ended up, I went through the apartment complex. I had to take all of these loans to go there, and it was just like striving. I have just the mindset was pump, and I wanted to take all these courses and how I could benefit the most, how I could learn the most. And I would try to get into shows, all kinds of little coffee shops like I was talking about, and they gave us free coffee and all this other stuff, all these other things. And then, it started, I was on student government committees in undergraduate and graduate. And so I got in ties with some of the professors, started building connections. And but my drive was always there. And then that pushed me to grad school. I took right after undergrad, I had to take another year and to build another portfolio on my own. And I needed to get it together more, because after coming right back from Paris and all that influences of Europe, I didn't have a concise, tight body. I was taking fresco and paint making, and I had to get a new portfolio, tighten it up. And then I was awarded again with the scholarships again, and I went with that. And then now I'm going to do the teaching, and it's just like, and then with the PhD, after I was accepted in the 3rd year into it, I already knew I was going to move to New York and be an artist, and that degree wouldn't be needed. But if I finish up from New York, move somewhere else, it will put it, that resume will put it to the top few to be seriously considered because of that degree. So it's, and I didn't want to be a quitter and not finish it. So part of it, for when my mother she was still alive, I really wanted to get that completed. So I did. And it's just been that drive. And then now it's, back to painting again here, but it's tough in New York City. I back to painting small. That's the largest one I did in New York City, 4.5 by 5.5 feet. But it's sort of that internal drive and mindset, and how to continue and how to just push yourself. That's I watch a lot of like these YouTube, you know, like Tony Robbins and these self-betterment and mindset and some of these on, you know, financial. I'm looking on building a second business now, or a at-home business and designing T-shirts and mugs, like graphic design, some of those skills to just get the production out to print on demand. So I'm like, that's the next thing now. So I'm about, you know, getting some money and getting some shows in New York that, but I mean, I'm not gonna, I sort of took off the brakes a little bit on the studio. Like I have friends of mine that are paying $1,200 a month, literally just for their studio outside of where they live.
Yeah.
Like that's every month. And I said, well, I need to save money and I need to get another business going where I'm just not gonna do that. I'm gonna paint small, paint acrylics, and try to work, you know, do more works on paper. That it's not as it's a lot. And after 11 years in New York City, I mean, you're taking a beating. And now with the COVID, like I'm renting a room, and it's just like in there, the four walls, and it's not like my cousin in California. She's under quarantine, but she has a house and a backyard, and you know, sit on the sofa and large big screen TV and a separate, you know, kitchen, and like I mean, I don't have any. That's just like I'm just under quarantine, like lockdown. And now it's you know, I'm on these trains, and in the Bronx I live was the hot spot of the epicenter. The epicenter. Now it's better, but it's just it's all mindset for me, just like to continue. And what's your goals? And I would list those. I'd have them write them down. I would suggest look at that Think and Grow Rich, about setting and writing down your goals, by Napoleon Hill, and some of these other books, you know, Tony Robbins, some of these others. I'm looking also at, you know, some of these other ones, business ones, and looking at saving up for rental property coming up in about 5 years. So I mean, I'm on the go. The head's always clicking.
Those are wise words, Art. Thank you so much for sharing that with the class, and I concur with so much of what you've been saying. I really admire how you have set goals all throughout your life, and I've known you a long time, and I think it's terrific how you continued with your education, got your doctorate, and I'm sure that certainly played into your success at the Metropolitan. You know, and I think it's also a reality check for students to hear about what is life in a place like New York City. It's always, everything is a balance in life, and there you have tremendous opportunity, but you also have to pay for that opportunity through the rent of your apartment or your studio or what have you. So but I really appreciate that you took time out of your busy schedule. Dr. Polendo asked for a day off from work today with the Met in order to do this presentation. So thank you so much, and thank you to the Met for allowing you to join our class today.
Well, thanks for asking, and thanks for offering this opportunity for myself to give a talk and share some info. And yeah, and I had a bunch of sick days used, I mean, because I was on lockdown. I wasn't taking vacation, so I had a bunch of days. So what a better thing. And
well, it's been a real pleasure. So you take care, and I hope things continue to and improve up there in New York, and that the Met's going to be able to open up some more down the road, and much success for your art.
Thank you, and you as well. I loved your exhibition at Bill House too. Thank
you, Dr. Polendo. I'm glad you were able to check it out. All right.
We'll see you. Bye, class. Bye, Summer.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.